is red.
All
All right. Good evening. Welcome to IntelliKea. I'm Dr. Rusty Barrier, and this is
Dr. Tricia Seymour. And we're glad that you joined us tonight. Tonight's topic, we have to read it to know ourselves, right?
ego versus the higher self.
Right, ego versus higher self. Who is talking in your head, ego or higher self? Learn how to differentiate the two. Living from ego, what living from ego looks like, and how that's different than living from your higher self. Experience ways to connect with your higher self and allow your life to move in a positive direction.
So before we get started into all that fun stuff, I just want you to get centered in your chair, get comfy, close your eyes, take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. As you take another deep breath, and as you exhale, feel all the worries and stress of the day flowing away on your exhale. And again, just relax and center and be at peace. And with the next breath, begin to focus on your heart. Right within the very center of your heart, begin to see a white light. And allow this light to grow brighter and stronger, filling your chest, filling your entire body. Feel this light as it begins to expand out through your very pores around you, forming an egg around your body. A beautiful white egg of light. And from this space, allow yourself to begin to come back to here and now. And when you're ready, allow your eyes to open. That little egg, by the way, is quite a gift when you start to use it on a regular basis. You will be able to find that once you get in that egg, it's an auric egg basically, you will feel filtered from what's around you. The news won't get to you quite as quickly. Right? The energies, if you're of a true introvert or empath, will be a little dampened. They're not just going to overwhelm you. That's a beautiful way of, I don't like the word protection because there is nothing out there that we need protection from, but it is like an airbag, basically. It's protective, but you're not creating it for that purpose. Right? So now we get to ego versus higher self, and how do you know when you're in one or the other?
So a lot of times what we'll do is we say, oh, I had a gut feeling, right? We all want to listen to our gut feelings. So, oh, I didn't like that, or I like that, or I should go there, or I shouldn't go there. We have a gut feeling. And we use that term because we feel it inside of ourselves. And as we've talked about, these classes are called advanced metaphysics because we're not really talking about the basic things. We're looking at things from a higher plane or a higher level. So gut feelings are something you should learn about, you should use, you should look at. And be aware that if you have a lot of unresolved issues inside of you, from your past, from trauma, from your family of origin, from wherever, your gut feeling may be off.
It may be coming through a filter.
Your feelings may be coming through the filter of that trauma. So, yes, if you see someone that reminds you of the person that abused you or whatever, you had a gut feeling that you don't want to be around them, I respect that. But please know, just because they look like, we're not talking about they act like, we're saying they look like physically, maybe like the guy or woman or whoever hurt you, we make a judgment about them that may or may not be accurate. It's coming through those filters. We all have filters, every one of us. It's called life, and we have filters based on our past experiences. Sometimes, if we're in tune with ourselves and in tune with things, that can be good because we can see the the person in front of us that might abuse us because we recognize the patterns of their life. And we go, oh, I got a gut feeling not to be there.
I see the red flags.
Right, I see the red flags. But too often people use the gut feeling concept as a way to avoid situations that may not be needed. You may not need to avoid them, or they may be something you need to look at or confront. So again, I'm not saying to ignore your gut feelings.
No.
I'm just saying it's important to know if that is your ego connected to your old story, right? Me separate, my world, my story from my trauma and my past, or if it's truly your higher self that's telling you about this person. Rusty and I have worked a lot of our stuff. We feel like we're relatively clear. Obviously, we're human, we're in human form, we're not perfect.
And we still get muck periodically.
And I will tell you, there are times where I will see someone and I'll make a snap judgment about them based because they maybe unconsciously remind me of somebody from my past. And once I get to know them, I realize I was completely wrong. So, it happens to everybody. But we need to look at it and just recognize, is this from my ego? And ego, what is ego?
Ego. Everyone's got one, okay? Or edging God out is another term for what people use for ego. Ego, though, is really that part of you. For me, it's sort of the user interface that comes with the body, right? It's what allows us to see separation. But unfortunately, over time, and I'm talking millennia here, not our lifetimes individually, but over time, the ego has devolved to where it only knows one thing: fear. And that's simply because it believes it's separate from all that is. It believes it's separate from the rest of the universe because its basic job is to allow us to see different bodies, different things. In oneness, there's no separation, right?
So the ego is like the key that in the ignition of the car, and this is the car.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, people are like, oh, you have to get rid of the ego, you know, and I don't think that's possible. I actually don't think it's physically possible. I think as long as you're in duality, even if you're truly enlightened, you're still gonna have an ego. And ego, we don't mean like, oh, aren't I great? That's one of the things ego can do is, you know, oh, I'm wonderful, I'm better than everybody else. But the other thing that ego does, as Rusty says, is it keeps you in fear. And it keeps you in survival mode, and it keeps you reliving your traumas, and it keeps you identifying with your past. And ego wants you to be in the duality.
It wants
Duality is all it knows.
And if you look at that sheet of paper we handed out tonight, you'll notice on one side it says love, and on one side it says fear. So here's a quick hint.
And then, by the way, this is in our book.
This is page 59, 57 in our book.
59 in our book.
I think it's 59 on the PDF.
Oh, okay.
I think it's 57 in the book.
It's in the book.
But we have two basic emotional states as human beings: love or fear. The hint here is your higher self is always in a state of love. It is fully connected. It knows you have never left Source and that Source has never left you, and it is actually impossible for that to occur. Right? Your ego believes, I'm different than Source. I must have done something to be cast out of the kingdom. All right? And I'm therefore fearful that if I've been cast out, I might not ever get to go back. Right? So you start looking at those feelings that are listed under there. So, love, I have a list, you took them away. So, what are the feelings that go with love, though?
But I also want, can I also
Sure.
mention, they're kind of emotional states.
Right.
So even though there's feelings listed on on this piece of paper that you won't be able to read on the video, even though there's feelings listed on the piece of paper, they're really more emotional states. You know when you're anxious or worried or kind of in a fear state or angry, I mean, you're not comfortable inside your body, right? And so that kind of falls into that state we're calling fear. fear is not a bad thing. I
No.
don't wanna say fear is wrong, I don't wanna say you should never be afraid. My word, if there's a poisonous snake sitting there in front of you on the ground, you should be afraid.
If you're walking across
Right?
the street and you hear a diesel truck horn blow at you, you probably
You
wanna
should be
move a
afraid.
little.
You should have adrenaline rush and you should get out of the middle of the road, right? So fear itself is not a bad thing. It just needs to have a place rather than be in control. And love is a word that we often don't like because somebody may have told you they loved you and then they hurt you. I mean, we have a lot of weird connotations with it. So what we're talking about with love again is a state of being that is compassion.
Unconditional acceptance, among other things, is part of love. Because
Right.
that's really for me, when I'm in a true love state, I accept it all. I don't have to, I don't pass judgment. By the way, judgment's on the fear side, you'll notice that. But think about that. Think about the time, because this is what we're asking you to do. This is what everything, this time in the world is asking you to do. Begin to understand, am I in a state of love or am I in a state of fear? And which one of those two do I want to manifest from? Okay? Because whichever state you are in is what you're going to keep drawing into you. Right? Now the good news is, the second if you discover you're in fear, you can go, oh, and choose again, and go back and say, how would love see this situation? How would that state of unconditional acceptance see this situation? And it starts moving you back out of it. As Tricia said, fear is going to keep you like this all the time. You're going to get tighter and you're going to get nervous and your jaw's going to clench and your eyes are going to, you get it. Love, you let all that drop. You stay in that space. So, for each of you, take a minute right now and just think, what are some of the markers, other than the words on this list? This is just to kind of jog your thought process. What are some of the things that you would assign to a state of love? Right? What would that be? Would it be connection? Would it be, one of the ones that I love from people is warmth. Okay? And I think, oh, that's emotional warmth. No, when you are in a state of love, you're warm. You're warm. In the breath work that I do with people, one of the first things I say is you're probably going to feel either very hot or very cold at some point in this session, and you may feel one on one side of your body and the other on the other. Warmth and cold, is what our brain translates energy flow as. When we are expanding, love, warmth. When we are contracting, cold, fear. Think about that. What do you do when you're in those states? So that's what I'm asking you to think about tonight as we go along. And as you get ready for that Q&A that's coming up.
Because as we're saying, how you know the difference between ego and higher self is ego wants you to be in a state of fear. Ego wants you to think about just yourself. Ego wants you to be in that place. Higher self says there's a bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
Ego says, as does fear, makes a judgment, as you mentioned. Higher self accepts. So these are kind of the differences between the two, so you know where you're coming from. We're all coming from ego at some point. Like
Right.
I said, you're not getting rid of your ego. But just to identify when it's ego versus higher self, because that does, as he said, both with manifesting as well as with just being in the flow of life. When you are more connected to your higher self every day, and your ego understands it's just a tool, not in charge, life flows better.
Judgment. Basically, when we keep using the word judgment, what I want you to understand in terms of ego and higher self, your ego judges. I don't like your hair, you must be bad. Okay? I don't like your shoes, you remind me of somebody, you're just like them. All right? You're obviously not. All right? The other side of that, under the higher self, is discernment. Okay, and there is a vast difference between discernment and judgment. Judgment is you're bad, you're good. Right? We turn it in on ourselves. You hear that good bad dichotomy there? it does it every time, then
That's duality.
that's duality, right? That's your ego. Discernment is, well, that doesn't feel right or appropriate for me. Does not mean it's not right or appropriate for someone else. So if I'm discerning and something's going on with someone else, I may choose to remove myself from the situation, right? A dear friend of mine, Dr. Jerry Jampolsky, made this statement one time. He says, I can absolutely love the person unconditionally and refuse to support the insanity in which they choose to live. Okay? You don't have to be a doormat when you're living from an open, loving space. Your higher self will not allow you to be a doormat because that's not loving to you, right? Your higher self is only going to give you messages that say, you can do this. You have the talent. You're enough. Your ego, on the other hand, is going to go, oh, you idiot, you knew better than that. Right? Well, what's wrong with you? Notice the difference? Pretty clear.
Right. And another thing that, along the lines of all of this, would be the more you want to control something, the more it is your ego. So, if you want to control another person, you want to change that person, they should be like this, why aren't they like this? That's all those judgments, right? Control. You're trying to control somebody else, that's your ego. Now again, if you're in a bad situation, rather than trying to control and change the other person, what do? You set a boundary, you get out of the relationship, you move on to something healthier for yourself. So again, we're not saying you're a doormat, you're just there, you're everything. It truly is, you still take care of yourself.
Right.
You still love yourself as much as everybody else. You don't put yourself in a one down position. And the need to be in control is ego. Now, there are times where we all have to be in control, right? Whether you're a boss at a job or you are
driving your car.
Driving your car, you need to be in control, right? To avoid accidents. If you're in an emergency situation, somebody has to take control. So it's not like being in control is bad. What we're saying is that there comes a point at which if you notice yourself being totally, I have to control every situation or everybody needs to meet my standard, that's again that judgment, and that control is so ego-ish, it stops flow. And what we want is to connect with higher self so that we flow in our lives, so that we flow the information, so that we flow with relationships, with jobs, with situations, so that we're in a space of heart-centered compassion with healthy boundaries, and we can go through life like this, in the flow of source, not trying to force it to be what we think it should look like.
And there are many words that the ego loves, but one it specifically loves is the word should. Right?
Shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Oh, no, just should. Just should. I could've, I would've if I knew better, but should. Should is the one that it, and trust me folks, when you should on yourself or someone else, it's very close to what that sounds like. That's how it feels when you're on the receiving end of a should. Alright? If I should've, I would've. Okay, it's that simple. And as Tricia was saying, when you let go of those shoulds, those oughts, the things that may actually have been programmed into you from childhood, okay, that your ego latched onto and said, this is how it works. When you let go of that, you begin, as she said, to step into that flow. Spirit, higher self, whatever you want to call it, looks at a situation, and then rather than getting wrapped up in the situation and how it should have been, it goes, okay, well, here's how it is. So if this is how it is, and I want this to occur, what do I need to do to flow with this process without denying what is? Unconditional acceptance. I look at the situation, it is what it is. right?
I don't have to be in control to change the situation.
I don't have to be in control.
Right.
Period, right? As a matter of fact, and I think I said this out in the lobby, every teaching says this, in order for, biblical, in order for a man to gain his life, he must first lose it, right? In order to attain success, I must surrender to success, right? We don't want this running our life. We want our higher self. We want source to flow through us, to run our life. And trust me, it goes much smoother. Now, knowing this, even practicing this, does not mean you're not gonna screw up along the way and get back into the other side. It'll go minute by minute, folks,
Well, and it's just really about naming the game.
Right.
So when you notice that you're trying to control another person or a situation or something like that, you just take a step back, you take a deep breath, and you go, I see where I'm coming from. I see what's playing out here for me. Let me take a deep breath, center again, and see if I can see the situation differently. And that's, we mentioned, imagine there's a low wall, and you're in the situation, and it's all going, and you're in the middle of it, and it's active, and you're trying to control it, make it look like what you want it to be. Take a deep breath, step behind the low wall, and see it from a distance, and go, and you'll see it clearer. And you'll go, that's it. I see my role, I see their role, I see what's playing out. I can choose differently. I can choose to do this differently. I can choose to come from a place of higher self rather than a place of ego.
One of the other things that your higher self will whisper to you, and trust me, it doesn't shout. If you're hearing shouting in your head, it is not your higher self. It is your ego. Is it will whisper that you're not enough. Okay, I'm sorry. Higher self will whisper you are enough, right? You can do this. You have the abilities to do it. And it will reinforce what you already are becoming, right?
And ego says,
you're not enough.
You're not enough. You're stupid. I can't believe you made that mistake again.
You did that
right?
again?
Or again, I don't like that person. They're bad. They're evil. They're terrible. Or all the judgments that we make every single day. That is our ego. And again, the more you're connected to higher self, the more you can trust that gut feeling. You can trust that intuition that comes. And not to say that's a bad person, but to say maybe that's a person I don't need to be involved with. Maybe that's a person that would trigger me or be something that I don't need in my life right now, or a job or a situation. You can make good decisions, but you're coming from a much more peaceful space, a much less controlling space, a much less judging space, and a much more compassionate space to everyone.
Now be aware that your higher self may also look at you and go, okay, you're in this situation. What are you trying to learn here? Okay? This is, again, your higher self will always encourage you to grow and learn. Okay? Your ego will go, get out of here. They're bad. They're evil. Protect yourself. Okay, well, okay, I can still step back. I can still look at what's going on. If it is truly dangerous to my physical or emotional well-being, get out of there, right? But once you've got the physical safety involved, then you can go, all right, what was this situation? How did I get in this situation? What was I trying to learn? Please notice there was one question I left out of there. Why? Right? Why is an endless loop, right? Why? Think of a 2-year-old. Why is the sky blue? Well, it's, that's just the way the sky is. Well, why? Okay, it's really and truly the the light refracting off the molecules and blah, blah, blah.
Finally, you just
why?
Go, because.
Right. We've all heard that one. Because.
Just because.
And they go, why? Yet again.
Enough.
Right. Why just put you in an endless loop? You don't need to know why something happened in your life to move beyond it. You only need to know what you were trying to learn. What is the gift in this situation? How can I use this to grow, really and truly?
And again, I know again, as we're saying, I'm using again a lot, aren't
Again and again.
Again and again, and again and again, and again and again. I'll get it all out at once.
Again?
Again, and then again. Now I'm gonna forget what I was gonna say. In metaphysics, sometimes people will say, and we have talked about this, people will say, you brought it to yourself, you caused it, it's your fault, you must have, blah, 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 fill in the blank. The truth is, things happen. Crap happens. Life happens. It's how we handle it and what perception we see it as. How do we perceive it? What have we learned? What will we not do next time? What will we know, right? What did we learn about ourselves? I think that's a much better way to go about it than,
How can I see this differently?
right, that's a great question.
How can I see this differently?
Yeah.
And that's actually, when you ask that question, you are automatically asking your higher self to show you a better way, a different way.
Your ego likes division. It lives and breathes in duality. So it likes the us versus them. So when you hear that in the news, you know, they believe that, and they believe that, and they're right, and they're wrong, and they're not, and all that. When you hear that us versus them stuff, that is solidly the ego. That's solidly the ego trying to, you know, get you to take a side. And what do you think? And when you back up and you see the game, it actually becomes humorous. And you don't get as caught up into the us versus them and those guys and the, you know, and all that kind of stuff as well. Are you here for the talk?
No.
Sound bath?
Sound bath?
Yes.
It's on the other side of the building. Uh-huh. So yes, so that's really the whole difference between
Right.
the higher self and ego, and how to identify where you're coming from. Again, we all have both.
Yeah.
We all have both.
And part of the reason for that list, and part of the reason for asking you to begin building your own list, is your body is a wonderful communication tool. And you will notice, am I feeling tense? Is my breath short? Am I grinding my teeth? Right? All those things are signs from your body of whether you're in a state of fear or love.
Are
Just
those
that simple.
fear or love?
Those are generally fear.
Usually they are. As you said, when you're coming from that state of higher self, you're much more relaxed, much more centered, much more grounded, much more
Right.
peaceful, and your life functions better.
You have a bigger vision.
Yeah.
All right,
Good job.
we're gonna stop for a few moments.